Good evening, Canada. Good morning, Philippines. And greetings to everyone joining us today from other time zones. My name is Helen Balderama, and I'm very pleased to be your MC for today's webinar discussion. We are very glad to welcome you all to the first edition of the UPAAT Culture and History Talks, a view to pre-colonial Philippine history, arts, and culture. Like you, I'm very excited about our program today, featuring the works of our esteemed speakers on Filipino culture and identity, as expressed in traditional medicine, tattoo art, and gong music. I would like to thank the UP Alumni Association of Toronto and its Education Committee and also acknowledge the support of our partners, the Philippine Consulate General in Toronto, led by Consul General Orontes Castro, and the University of the Philippines Press through our close collaboration with Director Dr. Neil Garcia. I'd like to mention a couple of reminders or house rules. Please make sure that your microphones are muted to avoid sounds in the background during the webinar. We will have a question and answer portion in the program. You can send your questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. No recordings of any form is allowed of this webinar other than that of the UPAAT organizers. Also, please note that the event is live on UPAAT Facebook account. Without further ado, let me invite our UPAAT President, Alice Herrera, who will be sharing a welcome message.
Thank you, Helen, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone, for those who are in Canada, at magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat sa mga nasa Pilipinas. I am happy to welcome all of you to the first of a series of cultural and history talks organized by the University of the Philippines Alumni Association of Toronto, or UPAAT for short, in partnership, as Helen mentioned, partnership with the Philippine Consulate General of Toronto and the University of the Philippine Press. Thank you so much, Consul General Orontes Castro, for your continuing support to UPAAT and for the partnership. UPAAT is also grateful for the opportunity of partnering with the UP Press, represented tonight by its Deputy Director, Prof. Cherry Los Baños. The UP Press is the official publishing house for all constituent units of the UP system and is the first university press in the country. I would also like to acknowledge that through UP Press Director Dr. Roseni Garcia, we were able to connect with and invite our distinguished speakers for tonight. The UPAA Toronto celebrates with the Filipino-Canadian community the 2021 Quincentennial Commemorations in the Philippines. We recognize the importance of the occasion in commemorating three important events that shaped our country's history, namely the introduction of Christianity in the Philippines, first circumnavigation of the world defined by the stopover of the Magellan-Elcano circumnavigation in the Philippines, and the victory of Lapu-Lapu in the Battle of Mactan. As the premier national university in the Philippines, we aim to promote the richness of Philippine heritage and culture. We may have taken up history classes during our university days, but I don't think we have learned much about the culture that was already existing before our country was colonized. Tonight, our distinguished panel of speakers will take us back in time and will walk us through how our country looked like back then, walking us through art, more specifically tattooing, through traditional plants and herbal medicines, and listening to pre-colonial musical instruments, specifically the gong. Before I end, I'd like to give a big shout out to the UPAAT Education and Awareness Quincentennial Committee, led by Dr. Miro Salvador, Trade Commissioner Nini Alvero, and Helen Balderama, and their committee for organizing this culture and history talks. Again, I would like to welcome everyone. I hope that you will be able to learn more about our culture and heritage and celebrate the Filipino identity through tonight's presentations. Thank you and maraming salamat po. And now for my other task, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, His Excellency Ambassador Rodolfo Dia Robles. Ambassador Robles, a lawyer by profession, graduated cum laude, Bachelor of Laws from San Beda University. After topping the 1967 bar examinations, he taught law in the same school. In 1971, immediately after his Master's of Laws degree from Harvard Law School, he was elected delegate to the 1971 Constitutional Convention, where he successfully incorporated the Ombudsman and the Miranda Doctrine in the 1972 Constitution as the principal author. In 1972, he organized his law office, which later became Robles, Brillantes, Rica Frente, Natura, and Aguirre Law Firm, and eventually he became also the Dean of the Arellano Law School. He was one of the JC's 10 outstanding young men of the Philippines in the field of law. Recently, in 2018, he was appointed as a member of the Consultative Committee to review the 1987 Constitution that finalized the draft for a federal constitution. The ambassador is also an accomplished businessman before he was appointed Ambassador of the Philippines to Canada. Friends, ladies, and gentlemen, let's all welcome our Philippine Ambassador to Canada, His Excellency Rodolfo D. Robles. Sir?
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. And thank you, Dr. Herrera. I'd like to begin by greeting first Dr. Alice Herrera, President of the University of the Philippines Alumni Association of Toronto, Consul General Orantes Castro, Dr. J. Neil Garcia, Director of UP Press, Dr. Analyn Salvador-Amores, panelist, Professor Ramon Santos, panelist, Dr. Mercedes Planta, panelist, other members of the UP Alumni Association of Toronto, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. I am honored to join you this evening for a view to pre-colonial Philippines, history, arts, and culture, the first of a two-part series on Philippine culture. And I congratulate the University of the Philippines Alumni Association of Toronto for organizing this cultural event. This month, Filipinos all over the world are observing the 500th anniversary of the Philippines' role in the first circumnavigation of the world and the victory of our forebears in Mactan. Known as the Philippine Quincentennial Commemorations, it is a timely opportunity for us to revisit the history of the Philippines and raise awareness of the rich culture of the Filipino people. While the events of the year 1521 continue to reverberate to the present day, I hope this series of discussions will also be an opportunity to debunk mistaken ideas on the history of the Philippines. The history of our country did not begin when the Spaniards arrived. Far from it. Archaeological and anthropological studies have shown that the history of the Filipino people may be traced back thousands of years to the first humans who lived on our archipelago and to succeeding waves of migration long before Ferdinand Magellan started to sail the globe. By the time the Spanish expedition reached the islands, now known as the Eastern Visayas, the ancestors of the Filipino people already had thriving communities. They followed a complex political structure, tapped the island's rich natural resources, conducted robust trade relations with its ASEAN or Asian neighbors, and practiced a sophisticated culture. Visitors from a variety of places, some from as far as Middle East, were already coming to the Philippines. Inasmuch as March is National Women's Month in the Philippines, I hope that our panel can also delve into the role of women in the different areas in the course of their discussions. The last 5 centuries have significantly diminished our shared memory of the important roles played by women in pre-colonial Philippines, which needs to be brought back to the fore. In essence and in practice, our pre-colonial ancestors had a deep appreciation for gender equality and empowerment of women. In this age where there is a high level of consciousness on issues such as women's rights, respect for different cultures, and protection of society's most vulnerable, there is perhaps room to learn from the wisdom of our ancestors. For our Filipino diaspora in Canada, which is the second largest Filipino diaspora in the world, second only to the United States, this event is also an opportunity to learn more about our cultural roots. I hope that the knowledge shared this evening can be a good supplement to the second and third generation Filipino-Canadians who may not be so familiar with Philippine history. Indeed, we Filipinos have much to be proud of. May I now thank the UP Alumni Association of Toronto for spearheading these talks. I also thank our Philippine Consulate General in Toronto, led by Consul General Orontes Castro, and the University of the Philippines Press for supporting this worthy endeavor. I look forward to the insights of our distinguished panel this evening and wish you all a fruitful discussion. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Robles. That was really an inspiring speech, and greetings to the community. And it's very important to emphasize that we are here around the world. Around the world is joining us, not only in Canada, our Filipino community, but also Filipino-Canadians and other Filipinos around the world. We now proceed with the publisher's remarks from Dr. Neil Garcia. Dr. J. Neil Garcia is the director of the University Philippines Press. Dr. Garcia teaches creative writing and comparative literature at the University of the Philippines Diliman campus, where he serves as director of the UP Press and a fellow for poetry in the Institute of Creative Writing. He is the author of numerous poetry collections and works in literary and cultural criticism. Between 1994 and 2014, he co-edited the famous Ladlad series of Philippine gay writing. Other important anthologies that he edited are Aura, the gay theme in Philippine fiction, Bright Sign, Bright Age, critical essays in Philippine studies, Busilak, new LGBTQ poetry from the Philippines, and the forthcoming Lamyos, new LGBTQ fiction from the Philippines. Dr. Garcia is the director of the Philippines for the project Global Grace, Global Gender and Cultures of Equality, a worldwide research and arts consortium sponsored by the Research Councils of the United Kingdom and Goldsmiths, University of London. He is currently at work on Likha, his 7th poetry book. Dr. Garcia is not able to join us today for personal reasons. However, we are so glad to have Professor Jerry Los Baños, UP Press Deputy Director for Editorial, who will be joining us later for the Q&A. And now, we will be sharing with you the publisher's remarks from Dr. Garcia.
Ambassador Rodolfo Robles, officers and members of the UP Alumni Association of Toronto, fellow professors at the University of the Philippines, viewers of this online forum, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant evening or day to you all. Allow me to begin by thanking the UPAAT for organizing this event and for choosing to invite authors of the University of the Philippines Press to present short lectures on varying aspects of our indigenous lifeways, musicological, medicinal, and performative. it is undoubtedly a laudable and most meaningful project. To remember, just as we are commemorating the Quincentennial of Philippine-Spanish relations, just how civilizationally rich our country's many cultures are and have immemorially been, well before the ceremonious arrival of Western strangers upon our shores. The official publishing house of our country's one and only national university is of course only too happy to help in this remembering, as indeed its authors have, in various discursive and literary ways, been carrying out the important nationalist task of cultural affirmation for more than half a century now. This is a vital function that I have seen in title after title that has come out during my term. I've been at the helm of the UP Press for a good number of years, and I can confidently say that, over and above being managerial, this administrative position has become something of an intellectual project for me. To be specific, it's given me the unique opportunity to reflect on the question of literacy and its relationship to our national and local realities, as well as to the abiding orality that characterizes and complicates our contemporary lives. In many ways, our residual orality and its personalistic, tactile, communal, situational, and anti-categorical psychodynamics may be said to provide clear evidence of the historical continuity of our cultures over the longue durée between our country's pre- and post-colonialities. It's my realization that, in sum, the business of publishing books in our country is synonymous with the business of promoting profound forms of archival and categorical literacy, which is the precondition for the kind of capacious imagination and empathy that are entirely necessary if a modern nation like ours should ever hope to cohere and, more importantly, to endure. These are thoughts that I've registered over and again in any of the formal UP Press speeches that I've needed to give across the years. This time, however, given the diasporic and international context of this forum, I am urged to reflect on the question of just what, to my mind, best characterizes the books that the UP Press is, in my opinion, inclined to publish, by and large. Other than recognizing the fact that most of our books are sourced locally, which is to say, written by Filipinos living in the Philippines, more and more I find myself focusing on the issue of address. It may not be easily apparent at the outset, but the fact is that all texts have an implicit reader, who is the addressee of the monologue or narration that the author of any book is overtly or covertly carrying out. This is simply unavoidable and holds true even when the book in question is scholarly rather than literary. Obviously, because they're written by homegrown scholars, our books are pointedly speaking to a Filipino readership. This to me represents an important publishing-specific realization, which might explain why, unlike other university presses in the country, the UP Press, from its inception, has not really been in the business of reprinting too many foreign-sourced books in Philippine studies. I can tell you that the editorial evaluation of prospective titles in this regard invariably picks up on this crucial problem of address, and it has often, in a variety of ways, determined the result of such a process. There's a marketing implication in this, of course. As far as I can ascertain, our scholarly books do sell better in the local market, which is composed primarily of our own local readers, precisely because they do not alienate such readers as far as this very basic aspect of address is concerned. It's important to remember that while the choice of addressee does not necessarily diminish the value of the knowledge or the understanding being offered by foreign-authored books in Philippine studies, it does explain why certain books reach and touch their desired readers better, and why certain books don't. Of course, strictly speaking, the beneficiaries of any title about our country should primarily and ultimately be us, and so therein lies the rub. I'm entirely happy for and proud of the fact that, as it only stands to reason, the University of the Philippines Press is the foremost publisher of locally produced and grassroots scholarship and creative writing about our own realities, warts and all, about and inside our beloved land. It is not accidental that the authors of such books are affiliated in some form or other with our dearest university. At this point, it might also be useful to mention what I perceive to be some trends in the scholarly books that have seen the light of print today during my watch. Just now, I'm tempted to think about the theoretical predilections and thematic affiliations that, to my mind, would seem to be guiding the academic inquiries of our university scholars and researchers of late. While the STEM books of the UP Press are admittedly mostly performing very basic and in that sense essential empirical, data analytical, and cataloging work, the humanities and social science titles have, by contrast, mostly been working within such theoretical discourses as Marxism, feminism, queer theory, post- and decolonialism, cosmopolitanism, cultural studies, post-formalism, and a kind of post-nationalism. In fact, this last ism, which I prefer to call critical nationalism, would seem to be what informs many of the foregoing theories, transforming them as they have traveled to and been translated for our own specific circumstances and purposes. All this bids me to consider the possibility of theories traveling, which is to say, concepts and ideas themselves becoming resituated, recontextualized, indigenized from locality to locality, and how this has most probably been the case for many translocal discourses and languages throughout our tempestuous history. We are hence encouraged to consider how the reframing, recalibrating, and repurposing of theories that may have originated in the global north, as these are engaged with by thinkers and cultural workers in the global south, are what most likely defines a crucial aspect of the North-South exchange. This is an exchange that remains asymmetrical precisely to the degree that the traffic remains mostly one way, basically from them to us. As our nation's founding father, the poet critic Jose Rizal himself realized and endeavored mightily to remedy in his multiple cosmopolitan engagements, this was the case during the Spanish colonial period. It remains to be the case today. And yet it's precisely this translational dynamic that complicates the effects and performativities of this exchange, affording the recipients of these ideological endowments the agency, an agency that is not entirely volitional, for the translation happens even without anybody wielding it, to resist. We may describe this resistance as intransitive, meaning, while nobody may be said to willfully resist, something nevertheless remains willfully resistant. As given by critics of decoloniality, its more popular name is, of course, hybridity. It is my opinion that, to varying degrees and in a variety of textual and metatextual ways, our local scholars have mostly been manifesting hybridity in their deployments of the various media and isms, for example, the Englishes, that they have been writing and thinking in their different textual interventions. As I see it, in all of these traveling theories, which are really translations, critical nationalism nevertheless provides some kind of guidance or inspiration. In light of the topic of our online discussion, I am tempted to ask, just what does critical nationalism as an intellectual activity entail? Needless to say, I have in mind the works of the speakers we have for today's forum, who are among the most eminent scholars and thinkers in their respective fields of academic expertise. To my mind, while politically invested in the concept as well as in the reality of the Filipino nation, critical nationalism is entirely wary of institutional nationalism and criticizes it for its many excesses. Among other things, it recognizes the fact that this discourse is produced and championed by our country's elite, whose interests it serves and whose bourgeois narrative it tells at the expense of subaltern narratives coming from marginalized subjects. Also, critical nationalism is careful to avoid the myth-making tendencies of any institutional nativist project that seeks to recuperate a lost pre-colonial identity, for what likely underwrites such an undertaking is a covert and persistent, needless to say, colonial desire to be affirmed by the North, whose attention and approval it continues to seek. By contrast, I see that the imperative to recognize and study our country's traditional and indigenous practices on the part of our scholars and artists bespeaks the desire to promote a vision and an understanding of our national culture, one that is, in the words of the anti-colonial thinker Frantz Fanon, and I quote, "not a folklore, not an abstract populism that believes it can discover the people's true nature. It is not made up of the inert dregs of gratuitous actions, that is to say, actions which are less and less attached to the ever-present reality of the people. As Fanon insists, a national culture is the whole body of efforts made by a people in the sphere of thought to describe, justify, and praise the action through which that people has created itself and keeps itself in existence." Finally, critical nationalism situates the issue of cultural production within unequal macro relations, which themselves constitute a specific modality of an expansionist, now unctuously called global capitalism. Needless to say, the salience of the class question, alongside other questions of inequality, remains integral to the critique that critical nationalist accounts must offer. Again, I would like to extend the gratitude of the UP Press and of the University of the Philippines in general to the UPAAT for providing the occasion and the venue of this important intellectual interaction. Allow me in parting to inform our audience, in particular our Canada and overseas residing alumni, that the books of the UP Press, including those authored by our distinguished speakers, are on offer on our own online shop, as well as in our dedicated stores inside the Asian shopping platforms of Shopee and Lazada. Here's to a productive and critically nationalist forum. Here's to UPAAT and all its cultural initiatives, especially the series of online discussions that it seeks to sponsor in the coming months. Again, a pleasant day to everyone. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. And I know that Dr. Los Baños is actually with us.
Ambassador is
And
raising his hand.
oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Ambassador Robles.
Helen, with your permission and the indulgence of everyone, I would like to be excused for my next appointment. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you very much,
Ambassador.
sir. Thank you very much.
I couldn't agree more to the remarks of Dr. Garcia. We are lucky today or tonight to have our esteemed guest speakers. So I'm very honored to be introducing them right now. Dr. Analyn Salvador-Amores is Professor of Anthropology and Director of Museo Cordillera, University of Philippines, Baguio. Dr. Amores earned her doctorate in Social and Cultural Anthropology from Oxford University, UK. Her research interests include non-Western aesthetics, material culture, ethnographic museums, and colonial photography in the Philippine Cordilleras. Her award-winning book, Tapping Ink, Tattooing Identities, Tradition and Modernity in Contemporary Kalinga Society, published by the UP Press, received the National Book Development Award and the National Academy of Science and Technology Award. As director of Museo Cordillera, Dr. Amores has curated exhibitions, including the 2019 exhibition entitled Hand-Woven Tales, The Warp and Weft of Cordillera Textiles. Dr. Amores was a recipient of the Metrobank's Outstanding Filipinos and Outstanding Young Scientist in the Field of Anthropology conferred by the National Academy of Science and Technology. We also have Dr. Maria Mercedes Planta. Dr. Planta is a professor of history and faculty affiliate of the Asian Center at the UP Diliman campus. Dr. Planta's work focuses on the history of medicine and colonial Southeast Asia. She is currently deputy editor of the Regional Journal of Southeast Asian Studies, an international peer-reviewed journal that seeks to provide a platform for Southeast Asian scholars to share their research internationally. Her book, Traditional Medicine in the Colonial Philippines, 16th to 19th Century, published in 2017, was awarded Best Book in Science by the National Book Awards of the Philippines in 2018. That same year, she was awarded the Andrew Mellon Foundation Fellowship by the American Philosophical Society. In 2019, Dr. Planta was conferred University Scientist of the Philippine System, University of the Philippines System, rather. And of course, finally, and certainly not the least, we are so honored to have our national artist for music, Professor Ramon Pagayon Santos. Professor Santos is also a recipient of the Order of Arts and Letters from the French government in 1987. National artist Santos is a composer, conductor, musicologist, scholar, and cultural administrator. His scholarly work has contributed to a deeper understanding of Filipino culture and heritage, and his compositions that combine avant-garde, musical orientation, and Southeast Asian musical traditions continue to influence today's young Filipino composers. National artist Santos trained in composition and conducting at the UP Diliman campus and received his master and PhD degrees of music from Indiana University and State University of New York, Buffalo, respectively. A global scholar and artist, Professor Santos has been awarded visiting fellowships and residencies by many prestigious artistic and cultural institutions around the world, including the Ford Foundation and the Asian Cultural Councils. His works have been featured in major festivals in the Americas, Europe, and in Asia. Please allow me to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Amores.
Good morning, everyone from Baguio City, Philippines. Good evening to our UPAAT alumni, and thank you for the kind invitation to share my research in this platform. So let me share my slides. So this morning, I'll be talking about tattoos in pre-colonial Philippines, specifically on in the Cordillera, where my area is my specific area of research. So allow me to share this photograph now with the commemorative 5,000 peso bill with the quincentennial anniversary of the victory of Mactan. So here you can see an image of Lapu-Lapu with full body tattoos, which is reflective of the Baxter Codex that was printed in 1595. So this is a commemorative peso bill now. So I would like to anchor my discussion on this as we celebrate this anniversary in the Philippines. Okay, so tattooing is both its practice and design has become a significant component of global popular culture and a focus of anthropological studies worldwide. So there are many literature on this subject, and in the Philippines, there is a strong resurgence on the revival of these traditional tattoo practices. So indigenous groups in the Philippines tattoo themselves as part of their permanent bodily adornments, social and religious affiliation, mark of identity, political position, social status, and biography. And many of the foreign visitors or the early travelers that came to the Philippines would view tattoo as a form of a savage practice. But this is a misnomer because having tattoos would actually reflect their very rich tradition, no, in the Philippines, and of course that reflects their affluence in that particular society. And I also want to correct, as I have argued in my book, that tattooing is related to headhunting. That is just one of the many reasons why people tattoo themselves, because we have this derogatory remark on the practice of tattooing. So if you contextualize Philippines in Southeast Asia, the rest of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao have a very rich tradition on tattooing. First, you can find them in Northern Luzon. We call them Batok. And then Batok in Visayas, what is popularly known as Pintados. And in pre-colonial Philippines, we have a lot of practices among the Tagabili in Tiboli, Bagobo, and of course in Manobo area. So if you can see here some of the illustrations, we also have a very rich tradition in comparison with other Southeast Asian countries. No, so they have a very rich tradition on tattooing. So what is the etymology of the word batok? So in Kalinga, you call this as wato, no, which is actually an alliteration or the sound coming from the tattoo instruments that produce the sound, like the tuk 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 when you tap the ink to that when you tap the stick to the tattoo instrument and it pierces the skin. So this is also in Austronesian languages, the Batok or the Batek term would come from Basik, Vetsik in Taiwan, Vitsik Batik in Indonesian communities. No, so you have here the alliteration of the sound of the tapping of the tattoo instrument. In the Cordillera, we have different. There's one root word for that, and like I said, it copies the sound of the tattoo instrument. You have batok, watok, fatok, batok, batek, batak, and batak in the different parts of the Cordillera, such as in Abra, Kalinga, Bontok, and Ifugao. So you can see here, Kalinga, Bontok, and Ifugao are the tattooing communities in the past. So if you go to Visayas, the term is patok, and if you go to Mindanao, in Tiboli, Bagoba, and Manodbo communities, they have a term for that, in various terms, and the popular for that is the pangutub in different Manobo communities. Now, the Manobo collective has different varieties, no? So you have Agusan Manobo, the Arakan, Kulaman, Matingaligan, and others, no? So they have that particular term, tattoo, in their local context and local symbolism. So as early as 1880, early German travelers have gone to the Cordillera to look at, to document people there. And you can see here detailed illustrations of a full body tattoo of a banao or an igorot in the Cordillera region. So in the American colonial period, Dean Worcester, who was an American colonial officer who went to the Cordillera, also documented them in mugshot style. So tattoos from Bontok, from Mountain Province, from Kalinga, and Ifugao areas. And this has been widely studied in relation to how these colonial photographs have contributed to our understanding of traditional tattoos. And one of the renowned full body tattoos that are also used as a material evidence for this practice is the seated mummy called Apu Anu among the Ibaloys of Benguet. And I've written a chapter on this book called Ancient Archaeology of Tattooing, where I discuss the designs and the relevance of this tattooing practice in Ibaloy community. So we also have a very good documentation of how pre-colonial tattoos would look like, such as this pintados, published in 1595 in the Boxer Codex. And we have a documentation of Prince Gioli from the island of Miangas in Mindanao. And the narratives of this were written by William Dampier in 1680. He was bought as a slave and was brought to London to be part of this exhibition or a circus in that area. So he was also buried in Oxford based on my research. No, and there was a writing that his skin was used in the anatomy department of the university, but my research did not yield result into this. But it was mentioned in the old books, no, in Oxford. So there's also documentation from Padre Alcina as early as 1668 about the natives, no, so-called natives that were tattooed, but they also have a very important role that they played, no, in that particular community. And we also have documentation of the Manobo tattoos, Agusan Manobo in 1925. This was also photographed by John Garvan, another anthropologist who came to Mindanao, and he documented all of these designs in the Visayas area. So now we can see remnants of this tattoos among the Manobo. And also we found in 2014 a tattoo practitioner named Bae Gabao from Tiguanon, Manobo, who still is practicing tattooing in that area. And recently there's a published documentation by Andrea Ragiago, who documented the practice of traditional tattooing among the Pantaron Manobo in Mindanao. So all of these are documentation of the practice, and I would like now to go to the tattooing processes. So I published this book, UP Press published this book, and I would like to discuss the tattooing process as documented in Buscalan in southern Kalinga, northern part of the Philippines. And I'm certain that our audience could relate because Apu Wangud, the 90-year-old tattoo practitioner, gained worldwide fame for the scarcity, the rarity, and the technique, no, used for tattooing. So this is the place where you have to go. You have to go up, climb up the village of Apu Wangud, and a lot of tourists are coming there to get tattoos from her. This is my field site where I stayed for 16 months in Bugnay, Kalinga. So what does manhuatok means? This means a person who does tattoo. And then the term tattoo artist already gained currency in the village because of the influx of the tourists for the last 6 years or so. So there is Apu Wangud. She would use charcoal powder, lemon thorn as the piercing attached to a stick. This stick would pierce the skin as she hand taps this particular tattooing instrument. And you can see here that there is indeed a widespread practice of tattooing because based on the research that we conducted, there are different tattoo instruments found in Kalinga. There's a tattoo instrument in Abra, Bontoc, Ifugao, and Benguet. No? So they come in different forms, from lemon thorns, steel needles, cactus thorns, among others. So there are two kinds of tattooing. One is the patik. This is the hand tapping method. And then the other one is the idiid, which is piercing the skin with the tattoo instrument. No? And among the Agusan Manobo and the Pantaron Manobo, they use the sangni or the knife that are pierced on the skin, and the charcoal are smeared, no, on the wounded part where the tattoo is made. So here's a short video of that particular method that I documented. So in my case, I also got tattooed, and then the tapping is a bit unbalanced, no. So it seems that the stick that Apu would hit my on my shoulders actually hit the bone, so you get a little woozy after that, no, so you can feel the sensation of the pain. So here you can see photographs of early documentation of tattooing process from Kipmore in 1913, no. So you have here, if you can see, the rice mortar turned down, and then you can see here young women, in the description of this, they were also chanting that was made to assuage the pain, no, being experienced in the entire process. So this is Bontok Hantap tattooing also. And these are the tools used by Wang Ud from the lemon thorn. So in the village, there is a lemon tree, and you can see that the the lemon thorn are almost they're gone, no, because each one lemon thorn is used for one person to be tattooed. And there's another instrument which is called the gisi, where there's let's say 4 or 5 needles that are tied to this carabao horn, and this one uses it is used to pierce the skin, no, in the actual process. And the other one is the piercing, hand piercing technique. This is tulgao in Kalinga, where they attach 10 needles, and these are pierced on the skin. And initially it makes the design, or it is used to blacken a particular design. And in northern Kalinga, they also use a wooden block called kamay. So when they begin tattooing, they dip this one, the wooden stamp, to a charcoal powder or an ink, and they stamp that on their skin. That would serve as the guide, no, when they start the tattooing process. So now there are variations of the idiid. Some use the rice shaft, a ballpoint marker, and a thread, no, in outlining the designs, and then these are pierced using the different tattoo instruments. And the source of the ink is from a charcoal powder now gathered from the soot of an aluminum pan. And this is mixed with a small amount of water, and then until you get the consistency or the thickness of that particular ink. These are also the different organic or plants that are used for tattooing, from the indigo tinctoria that produces the bluish dye. Then you have green peas that produces the greenish design. And then you have the leaves of the wild tomato, no, used as an ink for the tattooing process. No? So the ink also renders the color of the ink, no, that the tattoo artist would actually use, no, for this process. So in Kalinga, there are different tattoo designs. The one that is accorded for the male and the one accorded for the female. No? Some of them share symbols, but there are also special insignias that are used by the Kalinga. No? And here you can see designs of the lizard, the snake design, the rice mortar, the stars, and all other designs that you can see. Both would tell you the social position of that person. And of course, for the women, this is for aesthetics. And they also record the biography on their tattoos. No? So it's very important. So you can see their snake design, and most of these tattoos are found among the elders between the age of 60s to 80s. No, you can still find them in the village, but some of them are died, no, and buried along with their tattoos. It is important for a woman to become a full person once she gets tattoos. No, so this is also performed. They also perform, no, in cultural festivities, and they portray the turajan or the eagle, no, they imitate the movements of the eagle, and you have these wonderful tattoos with them too. So in death, they remove the ornaments, no, and the bodily ornaments. So what is left is the permanent tattoo that is buried with them. So in the afterlife, they believe that these tattoos would light up, no, to guide them in their journey into the afterlife. So there. So younger Kalinga women would have tattoos on the left arm only. Well, they would say that it's already painful to have the other part, but going through the process of tattooing is also very important. So on the last part of my discussion, I would like to briefly what is going on in in Kalinga. No, so uh, the village of Wangud is now visited by a lot of tourists going there. It's like a pilgrimage, no, climbing up the mountains. But since now it's pandemic, I think there are no visitors at the moment. They were prohibited from going to the village. But these photographs were taken during the pre-pandemic period. No? So a lot of tourists are also coming in to climb up and reach the village of Wangud to get tattoos in her village. No? So they built a special hut where visitors can stay and sit and get tattooed. So I've noticed that a lot of our young Filipinos, young generation of Phil-Americans are also coming there to get tattoos from them. No, so they will really line up, and this would be the tattoo swatch. No, if you go to a modern tattoo shop, these are like the tattoo designs where you could choose from. So in this case, this is printed on a wall, and visitors would just choose which patterns they would like. No. So this is Wangud would tattoo local and foreign tourists coming in the village, and different patterns, different designs based on the motivations of the person getting tattooed. Wangud also has younger apprentices. So this one, two others, and today there's a lot of tattoo artists in the village. The youngest is a 10-year-old, no? So this one we saw in the village, and they are learning how to tattoo because there is a great demand for these tattoos in the village. So it also changed the landscape of Buscalan right now. So I'm also working on a research on the effect of tourism coming in the area to get tattoos. Okay, so this is my presentation, and I hope you can send in some questions regarding this pre-colonial and modern tattooing practices.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amores.
Okay, so
There,
there's also a video about this documentation on tattoos. You can find this in the Pitt Rivers Museum as well. That's the link. And thank you for listening.
thanks, Dr. Amores. There are indeed many questions already I can see in the chat, but please hold on to that. We're gonna compile all the questions, and we'll be having them after all of the presenters have finished. So let me now call on Dr. Planta, please, um, to share with us her presentation on Filipino traditional medicine.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to your event. Today, I'm going to talk about traditional medicinal plants in the Philippines from the 16th to the 19th century. I was told that I have to make sure, because this event is organized not only to celebrate the 500 years of Philippine-Spanish relations, but also to bring to more Filipinos, and possibly to many different groups of people, certain traditions and cultural ways of life of Filipinos, particularly in the pre-colonial period. So my work begins in the 16th century. Why the 16th century? Because this is the first recorded work that made a documentation of traditional medicinal plants in the Philippines. The idea of medicinal or traditional medicine in the Philippines carries many different, is a range of practice. So you have medicinal plants, you have your traditional medical hilot, a person who practices who aids in childbirth, which probably we call today as a midwife. There is also a bone setter. All these things or all these practices contribute to the variety of medical traditions that we have. But my work focuses on traditional medicinal plants because I want to be able to uh, uh, bring to contemporary awareness that it is not only that Filipinos have an amazing way of life prior to colonialism, but also because from that amazing way of life, there is something that we can concretely make use of. So, a study on medicinal plants in the Philippines, especially the traditional medicinal plants, is what we would call a history, a usable history, something that we can derive practical benefits from. So, okay, so today, this presentation is drawn from my book. So it talks about not only medicinal plants in the Philippines, but how these medicinal plants form the repertoire of cures of traditional medical practitioners, or what we call the herbolarios, and their traditional medicinal cures or their medical repertoire is actually are actually plants that are everyday common everyday plants that people, most of us, see, especially in the provinces. But today, not a lot of awareness is, or not a lot of people are aware of their merits for a lot of reasons. Now, my discipline is history, so I begin my study with documents or accounts of traditional medicinal plants in the Philippines. The first is the work of Francisco Ignacio Alsina in 1668. This is the first work that documents traditional medicinal plants in the Philippines and their uses. At that time, Francisco Ignacio Alsina, he was a Jesuit assigned in the Visayas. He had no knowledge of a scientific ordering of things. Today, when you study botany, which is the science of studying plants, you have a particular system. You assign a scientific name. But at the time of Alsina, he only listed the local names. So over time, the possibility of being able to trace these medicinal plants are already very challenging. Number one, because some of the plants that Alcina described, of course, they are in the local names. Some of them we still know today. The most famous is the betel nut or the buyo, which we use for betel chewing. But others, because they are in local terms, we can no longer identify them. However, over time, Alcina's work, which was merely done for three primary reasons. Number one, he was a missionary. And in the period of Spanish rule, the missionaries were the first group of people who were assigned not only to promote Christianity, but they were also in many ways the knowledge gatherers of the practices of all groups of people that constituted the Spanish Empire at that time. So the bulk of knowledge in many colonies of the Spanish Empire were drawn from the works of the missionaries. The missionaries, in their desire to provide, to understand the people better in order to promote Christianity, um, were drawn to the people's practices. In the 17th century, even 100 years after initial Spanish rule in the Philippines, there was still no, the public health was non-existent. The Filipinos suffered many epidemics, many diseases that nobody could not make sense of. So the work of Alcina is fundamental, not only in understanding a particular period in Philippine history, but also in understanding how did people deal with their medicines or their issues of health. And so when Alcina observed that Filipinos' traditional medicinal practices in many ways work, so he thought of documenting them for the possibility that this could be tapped in the future. Alcina was not the only one. So you have Fernando Santamaria. But the most amazing work was done by Manuel Blanco. Manuel Blanco is an Augustinian who made a 3-volume work called Flora de Filipinas. Later, I will show you some of the prints that were made in the work of Blanco. This is a 3-volume work, first published in 1883. It took about 10 years to complete the entire set. It was reissued by the Augustinian Order in 1996. And if you come to Manila and you're interested in seeing this 3-volume, you can find it in the San Agustin Church. It sells for about $300. But when you see it, it's one of the most beautiful works on the colonial Philippines, and the paintings were done by the Filipinos. And according to certain sources, the works of the Filipino painters who draw the flora or the plants in this volume, they were considered to be our first painters. So this is what I did, was to graph the growth, the understanding, and the appreciation of medicinal plants over the years. Alcina's fundamental work only listed 25 plants. In the 19th century, a second work was made by Santa Maria. But what is interesting about Santa Maria's work was that this was translated into Tagalog. So the idea is this translation, Manual de Medicinas Caseras, probably it was translated into Tagalog because it had wider use. So most Filipinos probably, that is just a speculation, use it more than Alcina's work probably. In the 19th century, Blanco's work, or Blanco rather, came up with 1,386 plants. When contemporary botanists evaluated Blanco's work, they would always tell me Blanco's work muddled everything because he recorded 1,386 plants. He was not a trained botanist, and yet his work did not only, of course, it compiled 1,386 plants, but these plants were not in scientific order. They were just a hodgepodge of many things. So in effect, Blanco's work made everything more confusing. But I would always tell them, probably Blanco's work made things more confusing, but so would have been Alcina's work. The difference is Alcina only listed 25 plants, Blanco 1,386. But without these works, we would not have found anything else on this important aspect of Philippine culture. So of all the works that I have shown you, there is one plant that has been listed since the time of Alcina that has contemporary presence today. It has been scientifically verified, at least it has been identified. And in many ways, some people turn towards this plant, that I will show you later. So this plant is the tawa-tawa. It's in English, it's called an asthma plant, but actually it is used for dengue. Every time when people encounter my work, I always tell them, take this work with a grain of salt because this have not been scientifically verified. So don't take the book and look at it and you self-medicate because that doesn't work. But what I'm trying to tell you, there are things that can be drawn from this work that we can actually benefit from. So this plant, more popularly known as tawa-tawa, has a common use in contemporary Philippines. People say it is used for dengue, the main source for dengue, because it is famous for, it has the property of stopping bleeding. So From my work, I discovered that some dengue patients admitted in hospitals are being advised to take the medicine prescribed by doctors, but on the side, if they have an idea of the tawa-tawa, to actually take it. There is no scientific basis for it, but it is the beginning of a possibility that somehow in the Philippines, in 20th, 21st century Philippines, when public health is still not accessible to everyone, there is the possibility that we can develop something of our own. Let me digress a bit. When you look at China, China has a very well established traditional medicine. So you go to China, you either consult a medical doctor or you can choose your own traditional medical practitioner. And they stand on equal footing, meaning not one is superior than the other. And there is almost no distinction. And, and the nice thing about Chinese medicine, of course, it operates on a very similar level or a very common level, the balance of the yin and the yang, or um, the heat and the cold. But traditional Chinese medicine is different for every pharmacy, for lack of a better word, that you would want to visit. But the principle is the same, to have or obtain a balance between hot and cold. So these are the other words, more contemporary in the sense that when the Americans came to the Philippines, of course, we know Philippine history, public health is an American thing. So the work that I am currently working on now is the development of the American public health system in the Philippines. Of course, we know from history, the Americans, American colonialism brought many problems in the Philippines. But one thing cannot be disputed. Public health is an American thing, and it was brought to the Philippines. I mean, when you study American public health system, the toilet is an American thing. Prior to the coming of the Americans in the Philippines, we did not have toilets. The idea of a hospital, PGH, is an American creation and an American public health inspired institution. But the Americans did not only stop at hard science, they also looked at Filipino culture, primarily because even in the 20th century, with the establishment of a public health system in the Philippines that the Americans brought to the Philippines, public health access was still very limited. And so they had no choice but to look at how did people, ordinary Filipinos, look after themselves, cared for themselves in terms of health. And so they had no choice. They took the works of Alcina, Santa Maria, Blanco, put them together. Of course, one of the earliest is Trinidad Pardo de Tavera, who is not American, by the way. He is our ilustrado, one of the founders of the science of linguistics in the Philippines. And his contribution to linguistics is amazing. We were talking about the idea that today in the academe, people are measured according to their output, their academic output. In 1892, Trinidad Pardo de Tavera already fulfilled that condition. So he came up with a monumental work, Plantas Medicinales de Filipinas, which was translated into English. This copy, look at that, came from Ontario College of Pharmacy. In any case, so this work built on the previous works of Blanco, of Alcina, and Santa Maria. The Americans, or after Trinidad Pardo de Tavera, you have Leon Maria Guerrero, famous for writing or translating Rizal's novels, but also famous for the scientific work that he did in terms of listing the medicinal plants of early Filipinos. What is different about these works that I am talking about compared to the other works? These two are more or less informed about how it is to record plants in a more systematic manner according to the principles of Linnaeus. The most standard work is Elmer Merrill's 1921 work, An Enumeration of Philippine Flowering Plants. Merrill only focused on flowering plants, but some of the plants that he listed are also listed in the previous works. So over time, we see that the most plants recorded was in the work of Blanco. By the time of Merrill's work, there are only 78. It doesn't mean the use of plants have diminished. It only means that these are the scientifically verified works according to scientific contemporary standards in the 20th century, or precisely in the second decade of the 20th century. Plus, Merrill's work was only limited to flowering plants. So, from the works of the second half of the list that I showed you, there are 5 common plants. Now, in the 1990s, or these are the common plants that we have. So some of these are very common to us, like the achuete. The most popular use of achuete is when you cook your food, you put food coloring, the natural food coloring. Most Filipinos, we know what it means to cook paksiw. So I am from the Visayan region. We never eat paksiw without the achuete. Most probably in some parts of the Philippines, they eat paksiw plainly, like the bangus, with no achuete. In where I come from, we have to have achuete because when I look at the paksiw with no achuete, it's kind of scary. It looks as if the fish has, was braised in vinegar. It doesn't. It looks very pale. But in any case, so the achuete, the lowly achuete, is known for an aid to digestion, stomach aches, vomiting, diarrhea, gastric diseases, dysentery, cholera, gallstones. This is the manner of preparation. Powder which covers the seeds is used externally as a hemostatic and internally as a stomachic. But these plants are very common. Probably today, no one would ever imagine the achuete has this particular property. You have the dita plant. The dita plant, I will go back to it in a bit, but the dita plant is one of the most tricky plants that we have because it has so many varieties. The medicinal plant is for coughs, cold, fever, chest pains, headaches, sore throat, toothache. But unless you know what the dita kind of dita plant that you have, you don't just normally use it. So, but in the 1880s, in the place of quinine, this was used. Quinine is used for malaria. So at that time, malaria comes from the Spanish word, 2 words, mal, aria. People understood it as bad air. And so they thought when you have a house situated in a higher area, you will be spared from malaria. Of course, eventually they knew it wasn't true, but the word malaria is still being used today, even if it does not necessarily mean what it originally meant. Okay, so I don't know if you have heard of soro-soro, but this is used as an ingredient when you prepare a particular dish that's made out of goat meat, at least in where I live. So of the 5 common plants from the second half of the list that I showed you from the work of Pardo de Tavera, Leon Maria Guerrero, Elmer Merrill, there were 5, but the 5th remains to be Euphorbia hirta linnaeus, or locally known as gatas gatas, today used for an aid for dengue. Now, all of these things, in the 19th century, the Spaniards built the Real Jardín Botánico. It consisted of 103 plants situated inside Intramuros. The principle of building royal gardens is a colonial thing. When you make a survey of all former colonies, they most usually have a royal garden. It doesn't matter if it's a Spanish colony, a French colony, a British colony, they all have that. The primary purpose of a royal garden, even the name is so beautiful, Real Jardín Botánico, is supposed to be a repository of all plants in a particular colony, put together in one pretty place to promote a sense of well-being and a sense of leisure, the appreciation of what it is to have a good life in the colonies. But in the Philippines, the Real Jardín Botánico was economic in nature. So the plants in the Real Jardín Botánico, unlike other botanical gardens, which had a particular focus not only on plants that are beautiful, but plants with medicinal purpose at the same time. The Royal Jardín Botánico in Intramuros was solely dedicated for economic purposes. And the most important products that were planted in the Royal Botanical Garden included indigo, which Dr. Amores had talked about. But here, the purpose of the indigo was for dyeing. So to make clothes, to color clothes and to make them pretty. There was also cotton. The Spaniards tried to produce cotton, but of course, they never truly, fully succeeded. The other one was cinnamon. Everyone was crazy about cinnamon because at the time, these are part of the array of spices that most Europeans desired from the Orient, which included us. But the cinnamon in the Philippines was not really of the variety that was ideal. So its production did not reach the height of cinnamon production in comparison, for instance, to Indonesia. So our cinnamon is not really of the good variety. So the Royal Botanical Garden was not only a place to put plants together, but to provide a repository of the possible resources that the Spaniards could actually draw from the Philippines. And the more they looked at the Real Jardín Botánico, the more they realized there's really not a lot of resources available to exploit in the Philippines, unfortunately for them. So this is the compendium of all medicinal plants. So 1,386 plants listed under Blanco has been reduced to 103, primarily because the 103 plants have been scientifically validated. Okay, so my time is up. That is my presentation. I hope you were able um, to enjoy it. Thank you so much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Planta. We're compiling the questions. They keep coming on in the chat. So a few of us are monitoring that. But for now, let me introduce or reintroduce Professor Santos, our national artist.
Good evening to everyone. First of all, let me thank Dr. Alice Herrera, Roseni Alvero, and all the members of the UP Alumni Association of Toronto for this invitation to share with you some of the musical traditions of our country. As you know, the gongs and bamboo are materials that permeate practically all the musical traditions in Southeast Asia, from the insular to the peninsular lands and to the regions in South China, where it is believed that the Gong tradition took root many years ago. But this short presentation shall concentrate on the Gong cultures in the Philippines, their different usages and appearances in the life of the people of both ancient and contemporary Philippines. And in the Philippines, there are two types of gongs. The flat gongs, which are found only in the Cordillera Mountain region of northern Luzon, and the bossed gongs, which are spread throughout Mindanao, the Sulu Archipelago, Palawan, and in some parts in Bohol. The playing styles and techniques of gong instruments vary from one group to another. Let us first talk of the flat gongs. Among the Ibaloy of Benguet, the two flat gongs called kalsa and pinsak are played in an ensemble that includes two long conical drums called sulibao and kimbal, together with a pair of iron bars called palas or tintik. There's the there's the tintik. They accompany the dance of a man and a woman with blankets on their shoulders. Among the Ifugao, the flat gongs are called gangha, and there are at least three in an ensemble. Okay, let's look at the if yeah. Uh, the tobob is played either with clenched fist or with the palm of the hands, with the right hand in sliding motion, while the player kneels and the gong rests on his lap. There it is. The two other gongs, the hebat and the ahot, are struck with sticks and may be played in sitting or standing position. The ensemble usually accompanies the dances of men and women who execute hopping steps with one hand extended while the other is bent against the body. Can we look at that next? Yeah, okay. Okay. The Kalinga, on the other hand, the Bontok and the Tingyan share a style of playing the gangsa in an ensemble of six or more gongs. You see, these are all different styles. In the Palook or Patong style, a group of six or more men beat the gongs with padded or unpadded sticks in interlocking rhythms that produce a repeated melodic motif. The men dance while beating the gongs that also accompany dancing by the women. Sometimes the women join the dancing. Another style of playing the six gongs is called topaya, wherein the men are in kneeling position and the gongs are tied to their belts and resting on their laps, just like the one that here on this one. The gang sa topaya usually accompanies the dance called tadek, executed by a pair of man and woman. There are other Kalinga ensembles like the Pinalayan and the Pinalandok, while the Itneg also have six gongs, have the Kinadyayan, again with slightly different techniques of performance. Let's look at the two principal ways of playing the Palok and the Tupaya. You can see sometimes they have different choreography. Okay, now let's look at the topaya, which is done with the hands and can see that even among the Cordillera people, they have different styles of playing and different numbers of players in this flat gong or called gangsa. The bossed gongs, on the other hand, uh, vary a, vary a great deal in sizes, in form, as well as functions and repertoires. The kulintang is perhaps the most well-known today of the knobbed gong instruments in the Philippines. There are two types. One is made of 5 to 13 small gongs of graduated sizes and placed in a row on a long wooden stand. This is prevalent among the Islamic communities in Mindanao. Another is the hanging kulintang. Okay, this is the gongs laid in a row. And as I said, it predominates among the Muslim Islamic groups in the Philippines. While this is a kulintang that is hanging. Okay. Uh, Suspended from a wooden frame from the lowest to the biggest gong to the smallest on top. This type of kulintang belongs to the upland peoples of Mindanao, or sometimes we call them the Lumad. Okay.
No.
The kulintang that is laid in a row serves as a melody instrument. Okay, the next slide, please.
Okay.
Next slide. Okay. That is laid in a row as a melody instrument in an ensemble of other gongs, in spite of the fact that there is no standard tuning or temperament in the formation of a loose pentatonic scale.
Mhm.
Among the Maguindanao, the Kulintangan Ensemble or the Palabuni-Bunian, that's the Palabuni-Bunian that you are looking at, consists of the 8-gong kulintang, a medium-sized gong called babandir. I don't know if you can see that. 2 large deep-rimmed gongs called agung here. A set of 4 shallow-rimmed gongs called gandingan. I think these are the gandingan. And the goblet-shaped drum called the bakan. There. The Maranao kulintang does not differ much from the Maguindanao, except that the gongs are a bit bigger in size. There is no gandingan in the entire ensemble, and the 2 agungs are played separately by 2 performers as against 1 performer in the Maguindanao performance practice. The repertoires are also different from one another. Okay, now let's listen to this is Maguindanao Kulintang Ensemble or the Palabuni-Bunian. Okay. Another ensemble called Tagungguan belongs to the Yakan of Basilan Island, where the Quintang has only 5 small gongs. The Maguindanao has 8. The Yakan has only 5 small gongs spanning an octave. We can see in this next example that the Quintang has only 5 gongs and can be played solo or with an ensemble or to accompany a dance. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, this is a solo performance on the Quintang. Quintang, it's not Kulintang. Quintang. can see how dexterous he is. Okay. By the way, he's playing kuriri. And that is the inspiration that I got from the composition that you just heard. The kuriri. Okay, let's listen to the next one. Now this is with a dance. No? Okay. Okay. Uh, and then we have the bagobo. The bagobo called their ensemble tagongo, consisting of 7 to 11 suspended gongs in 3 rows. There are at least 2 musicians who play the gongs, one beating the drone on the bandilan. Bandilan is the drone, and the other playing melodic improvisations on the upper gongs. In some instances, more than one musician plays on the upper gongs in separate groupings of 3 or more tones. The players move their bodies to the beating of the gongs, and sometimes they dance away from the gongs, except for the bandilan player who remains to play the drone. Okay, let's look at this. Here's the bandilan. Okay, you can see that this player is also dancing, huh? And then she leaves the gongs and she dances with the other dancers, and then somebody else takes over. You see, this is a very dynamic performance style, no, of the bagobo. Okay, now among the suspended gongs, the tiroray segegung is perhaps one of the most unique in that they are small and are narrow rimmed or are handheld and are played in a group of 5. Okay? The music, mostly about nature and human behavior, is created by interlocking rhythms and the different strokes of the padded sticks on the knob and the body of the gong, as well as the resonance, the dampening, and the clicking of the sound by hitting the wooden part of the stick in the improvisation executed by the 5th gong. The music of the segegong is played for agricultural rites, weddings, as well as other occasions. Here, there is a dance. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, yes. Okay, this is the Tiruray. This is the Tiruray Agong Ensemble. You can even see their dresses, how colorful their dresses are. Okay. Okay. Okay, we can stop there. There are many, many more gong ensembles, and there are just a few of the. These are just a few of the more prominent ones, no. There are also gong ensembles among the upland regions in Mindanao, such as the Tagakaolo, the Tiboli, and the Subanen. Then there is also the Palawan people and the Sama de Sitangkay in the Sulu archipelago. All of these have the bossed gongs, okay? In all of these cultural communities, as well as all the neighboring countries all over Southeast Asia, the gongs remain predominant even as they characterize the life and cultures of the majority of peoples that inhabit this part of the world. A life of spirituality, a life of subsistence, a life of leisure and entertainment, and a life of communing with the natural environment. These instruments then express a cosmology of beliefs, which sustain the existence and the dynamism of everyday life in the villages, as well as in the aristocratic courts in Southeast Asia, while they also, even at this time and age, reflect their Asianness and humanity in all its facets and diversity. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, Professor Santos. Let me now invite my colleague, Nini, who will be facilitating our Q&A.
Thank you very much, esteemed speakers, for such insightful remarks and presentations. The audience reaction through the questions that we have received indicates great enthusiasm and interest. So without further ado, I would like to open the question and answer portion of our program. Let me start. We go by the by how we have received the questions, by sequence. So we'll start with a question for Dr. Amores. Mr. Joe Sakala of Toronto is asking, is there documentation about infections and how they were treated?
Yeah, based on my research, there are no record of infections in the village, no, because they have also indigenous ways of treating the wound, no. So they would go to the river, bathe themselves, and then they use a plant called I forget the scientific name, but it's a green plant, and they rub it on their skin, on the wound, to serve as antiseptic to avoid infections. But now the current practice, I see that the younger Filipinos who would go there would actually have infections because there are traditional ways of doing it, but now it's kind of modern. So they put several ointments. They wash the wound with water. So definitely you will have infections there. But the traditional ways, there are perfect timing, when to heal the wound, when to take a bath. There are also ngilings or taboos that you should not eat. Like yung all of this food that would cause itchiness, no? So there are ways how to actually do that in the traditional way.
So there is a convergence between the traditional method of tattooing and the traditional medicine of our
Yes,
forebears. So I
exactly.
have a question, another question from Miss Chi, a UP alumni from Vancouver. Is there a practice of getting tattooed and then getting it removed and changed to other themes?
Okay, I'm talking about the traditional patterns for the indigenous people. So of course, when you tattoo this specific pattern, this is for you. No, the elders would design a specific design that is meant for you because of your status, the biography that you put in there. For instance, among the Tiguanon in Manobo, they have this tattoos of the mountains, of the stars, and others, because that represents your clan or that represents you in that matter. So in Kalinga also, there are specific designs that are worn by the elders, no? the process of changing or removing is not a practice but adding more to that particular pattern, no? So even the tattoo artists or the tattoo practitioners would have their signatures or signature designs on their tattoos, no? But in the modern times, there's now, when you go there for self motivations, and you have these different designs to represent your story or your narrative, no? So naturally, what's happening now, there's a mix and match of tattoo designs, no? And sometimes it's muddled, no? In one of my experiences in the field, some local tourists would go there and would ask Apo Wangud to tattoo a Times New Roman for a name. Of course, this is not in her repository of traditional patterns, not to get a font design for that matter, no? So for traditional practices, you add to the design, okay, new designs, no, but not on a patong-patong, or you change the whole meaning. But there are also other designs that you can add, but today it's quite different. They design their own designs.
I see. And then another question from RC. Are there rituals that would be practiced in preparation for, during, or after tattooing?
Okay, Nini, I think I answered this online, but I will do it again.
Okay.
Yes, there are practices before the tattooing. Before the tattooing process, you have the paranos, or these are the ritual offerings, like butchered chicken. You have to feed the tattoo artist to make the whole process smooth, no, during the process. And then, of course, during the tattoo process, because it's painful, the manwatok, the manbatok would actually chant, no? And these chantings are actually prayers, no, to assuage the pain of the person, no. And sometimes these are lessons, no, sung in the liliwa, or in chants, no, to entertain those people looking at the process, or even the person getting tattooed, no. And then after the process, you also do some offerings again. So they smear blood, chicken blood, on the wound of that tattooed person. Just they have also some prayers now to heal fast. In Ifugao culture, this is the most deified na process of tattooing. So they have the god called Batukungan. They have a god for each of the process now of tattooing. In the same way with the weaving process. So there are 16 deities, no? And in tattooings, there are also deities that you have to appease, no, to have the process, to run the process of tattooing smoothly, and also to recover from the pain, and to let the wound heal fast, no, in that matter.
And we have a question from someone who is from the region, and also from the UPAAT, Gretchen. What is your opinion on the issue of the commercialization of traditional tattoos?
Okay, I was talking offline to Gretchen. No, I wrote a piece on commodification of culture in the Cordillera. Now, in relation to tattoos, I was also bothered by this, because these tattoos have now become a brand name, or a brand, no? So it's cool to have tattoos because it's from Wangud, and now they appear on t-shirts, sneakers, hats, what else, mugs, what have you, of all these tattoos. It's highly commercialized, no? My position in that, when I went to the village to ask the Butbut in Kalinga, I asked Wang Ud what she thinks about this, and then she replied to me in the local dialect. She said something like, "I have nothing against it as long as it feeds my brothers and sisters in the community. I will not run after them." So I was really shocked to listen to that reply, because yeah, it's feeding the community with all of these tourists coming in. They produce t-shirts and they give the share to the community. So what can she do about it? And for us academic, we have or educators, cultural advocates, we have been against this commodification. But this is also a form of cultural affirmation that the culture can be innovated. can be redesigned, can be revived, can be reinvented. No, so it is a process of reinvention of traditional tattoos. They come in different forms. Younger Filipinos, even diasporic Filipinos, have come and get tattoos and carry this back to their community. So for me, it's a living record of this old practice now currently being revived. So I don't see uh, uh, I'm not aggressive, no, against it, but it's a sharing between the indigenous communities and those outsiders. But of course, you need to
You know,
respect them as well.
And last question before you go, Dr. Amores, because I know you are going into another Zoom meeting. I've read in your bio that you are a project leader for the Cordillera Textile Project, or Corditex. Can you tell us how you view indigenous influences as part of contemporary fashion? I guess this somehow relates to your earlier discourse. But what is your stand in terms of commercialization of indigenous fashion?
Okay, that's a recurring issue when it comes to the textiles, because among the indigenous groups, there are also sacred designs that you cannot use for fashion. No, to my surprise, there are also death blankets or funerary garbs that are used for bed sheets or gowns. No, so I resist against that use. No, for those who really want to revive traditional textiles and all, you have to study deeply these textiles are all about. No, I see people wearing funerary blankets that you're not supposed to wear, no, because that's taboo in their local culture. So I think research plays an important role, educating people also about this traditional textiles. So in the Corditex, this is an interdisciplinary team of anthropologists, historians, physicists, chemists, ethnobiologists, everything, no, ethnobotanists, to study deeply this traditional practice of weaving. Now, we have mounted an exhibition of Cordillera textiles at the Museo Cordillera, and that is the platform where you could come and learn about these textiles and be respectful of these traditional patterns and its uses.
Well, with that, we will be releasing you, Dr. Amores, for your next Zoom meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and to UPBAA, congratulations for organizing this event. Okay, bye, sir. See
bye-bye.
you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so
Bye-bye.
much, Dr. Amores.
Yeah.
Nini, I just
Yes.
have a quick question. Because I'm conscious of the time. It's 9:55, so I was just thinking maybe if we take two or three questions for Professor Santos and Dr. Planta, um,
Okay.
and
So,
then the rest
okay.
of the questions we can send by email.
Okay, there's also one question for Neil here. So let me ask Dr. Planta. This is from husband and wife team Diana and Fred Gamboa of UPAAT. And they're all related, no? The question from Joe Sagala as well, and another question from Chi Guzman in Vancouver. Is there any government or educational, UP, for example, initiative to research into possible commercialization or at least popularization of the medicinal plants? And then, is there any chance with the interest to return to herbal medicine and to translate this into commercial endeavors for present day applications? And why is the Philippines not able to develop a thriving medicinal herbal industry, similar to TCM in China, traditional Chinese medicine?
Okay,
Dr. Planta.
thank you for the question. In the 1990s, Dr. Jimmy Galveston of PGH has already, and Flavier, then
Yeah,
the
but there,
Secretary of
yeah.
Health, he's spearheaded the development of 10 traditional medicinal plants for study and for pharmaceutical use, and made popularly available. So from these 10, the most common is guava. So the standard use is as an antiseptic. You have sambong, which is for cough, and you have lagundi. There are others, but these are the most popular. These 10 medicinal plants have been selected primarily because of their availability, easy to source, and because not only that traditional literature validate their use, there is local knowledge to validate their use, but because these, I think the most important consideration was that they are easily available in many different parts of the Philippines. Um, the idea that we have not truly developed a traditional medicinal um, the idea of appreciating and using traditional medicinal plants, I think, has to be seen in two levels. Number one, institutionally, because our public health focus, orientation, history is mostly very Western.
Yeah.
So, and by Western, it means American. So the prioritization of pharmaceutical drugs. One of the reasons given for not paying attention to medicinal is that how they are prepared. So these are leaves that you boil them in their raw form. But when you look at traditional medicinal plants in China, they are not only very raw in preparation, they are kind of like out of this world. You have a liquor of snake bile, which you take for potency. The most popular, of course, is Viagra, but uh, probably because they are, into those kinds of things. We don't even have those things.
Mhm.
But it is just that the hold of modern pharmaceutical companies
Mhm.
in the Philippines
Yeah.
is probably really very, very strong. But
Mhm.
um, if I may just bring this up today, because we are now having a pandemic, there's a Philippine group that proposes to develop and study further the possibility of virgin coconut oil. It's a very long, stable practice,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it has it has always faced a major stumbling block
Mhm.
because the use of virgin coconut oil is strange to Westerners.
Mhm.
They patronize olive oil because
Yeah.
they don't have the tradition of coconut oil.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, there's so many bad
Mhm.
publicity about virgin coconut oil. But
Yeah.
this is, at the moment, one of the most promising possibilities. It's cheap, it's easy.
Mhm.
I mean, there is a whole range
Yeah.
of proof of its efficacy, especially among the Pacific group of islands.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very
it's a,
much, Dr. Planta. And now we move to Professor Santos, our national artist. Professor Santos, there is a question. How do you see the development of the Gong culture in the Philippines? And how important is it for young Filipinos to learn about this musical tradition?
Uh, you know, as I said, no, we have 170 language groups in the Philippines, more than 170 language groups in the Philippines, and each one has its own traditional practice, no, musical practice. Ang sinasabi ko, yung mga those people who belong to the region should study their own music, no, first, and then later on they can disseminate that. In fact, in the University of the Philippines, there is now what we call uh, a group of uh, group of students who are majoring in Asian music, no? And they are fantastic gong players.
Mhm, mhm,
And these are not non-Maguindanao,
mhm.
Maguindanaoan, but their teachers are Maguindanaoan.
I
This
see.
is what I'm saying. You
Mhm,
know, in Thailand, they use their masters to teach in the universities, even if they are not educated, even if they did not go through formal education. You know what they do? They give them honorary bachelor's degrees. They give them honorary master's degrees. And they are able to teach in these universities. And we still have many of these masters lying around, and they are not being utilized. Right now, they have what we call schools for living traditions. Okay, uh, I think that has been an initiative of the NCCA. But they have to be used by the universities, by the schools. Ang dali-dali niyan eh. Ang dali-dali. It's very easy to use them. Just that we are too Western. I tell you, that's good. Yung sinabi ni Iking, Analyn Amores, yes, we are too Western in our thinking. Even the term music should not be used to describe our traditional practices. They are not music. For example, passion, is that music? That is a prayer. That's a ritual. Okay. Anyway, I have a whole.
Which leads us to another question from Dindo Gonzalez. No, so how is Gong music actually documented, or is it documented at all to be taught and played in the same way by another person, or is it self-expression?
Yes, it is documented. For example, we have the UP Center for Ethnomusicology, which has documented the music of 78 language groups in the Philippines. We have documentation of that. But what is important is to use the masters themselves. In other words, it can be transmitted. It can be transmitted just like any other cultures. In fact, in the US now, there are 10,000 gamelans, Indonesian gamelans. Why can we not? Why cannot we disseminate that our music? Of course, in California, they have a Kulintang ensemble now, because of anyway. I mean, after all, life should go on, and culture should be is dynamic, and
Now, there is a question from someone Mr. Leo Mascareñas.
oh,
Is there a difference in the metallic composition of alloys such as brass used for making gongs? And if it's yes, does it affect the quality of the sound?
yes, yes, of course. But now, in Indonesia, they still use the old traditional way of making gongs, and they even pray. But now we have, by the way, the gongs were actually transported to us, but through China, before many years ago. But now we have gained the knowledge to produce our own gongs. The Maguindanaos are producing gongs now, Kulintang and all that, which is good. I just don't know how the composition, whether it's alloy or iron or what. But the ancient ones are really the good ones. They have to research on the knowledge of producing these ancient gongs coming from China, and all that.
Out of curiosity, Professor, are there many contemporary musical compositions now that use gongs in the Philippines? And I'm sure you might have been approached by these composers.
Yes, of course. Well, I teach. I've taught many students, so they are now using these gongs. Uh, but still very few of us. But because of this, like the bayanihan, and all these other, uh, they imitate and they kind of misrepresent sometimes, these the traditional ways of doing things, because of course for theater effect, no.
Mhm.
But of course, I've been asked about the authenticity problem. I said, well, everything is authentic. Even their imitation is authentic, right? Imitating something is an authentic act,
Prof.
right?
Santos, that's a very avant-garde answer. But it's true.
Oxymoron. It's an
Yeah, of course.
oxymoron.
I have lectured in Tampa, Florida before, and I said authenticity is everything that we do. It's everything is authentic.
Yes.
But what is important is the misrepresentation.
Mhm, mhm,
Okay,
mhm,
like I have been asked, oh, how about your compositions? Like the kuriri, kuriri is taken from the yakan. I
mhm,
said, I use the philosophical and the theoretical aspect of the kuriri, and then make my own music out
mhm,
of that.
Mhm.
mhm.
So you see, so that's different from imitating the sound itself.
Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Can you understand that? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so if you were inspired and then you created your own original music,
Yes,
right?
that's
So
right.
that is authentic. Yeah.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm,
of course, everything is authentic, as I said.
Yeah. Thank you
Whatever
so
you do.
much.
yeah. We have one last question for Dr. Garcia, who would be answered by Professor Jerry Los Baños or Dr. Jerry Los Baños. Um, would UP Press be open to more collaborations such as this? Perhaps book readings, poetry readings. What are your thoughts, Dr. Los Baños?
Just Jerry, please. Good morning to all.
Jerry, yes.
Actually, this is not the first time we've collaborated with our authors and with a live audience. We have had several short conference and seminars and talks with the LICAN, ICW, the Institute of Creative Writing, although those focus on literary titles where we have our authors discuss their work and the implications on the nation with, well, it used to be a live audience, but since last year, of course, we've moved online with these discussions. The next discussion will have to do with a book by the Resilience Institute of the University of the Philippines, headed by Mahar Lakmay, and they'll actually be talking about the disasters, the recent natural disasters, the typhoons, the floods, which have affected the country over the past several years, and which she compiled in a timeline of Mindanao disasters in one of our recent books. So this is not the first time we've collaborated with institutions to discuss not just the titles or our books, but the implications and issues that come with the topics of these books. And so, yes, we are very interested and very willing to collaborate with other institutions in these discussions.
Oh, thank you very much, Jerry. Unfortunately, our time is up, and it's been up since a while ago. But we will endeavor to have to have all the speakers answer all the questions you have raised. We have noted them all down, and if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to email those questions to UPAAT at UPAAEXEC.
No. I've placed it in the chat box. It's
Oh,
upaaexec@gmail.com.
okay, it's in the chat box. Okay,
I'll put it again.
which which is there. So feel free to do that. And now I turn the floor to Dr. Mero Salvador, the chairman of the Education and Awareness Committee, who will deliver the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nini. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That was very interesting and very enlightening. Events like this brings us together and makes us realize that we are part of an inclusive community, and it helps us reflect on our identity. This would not have been possible without our partners, the University of the Philippines Press and the Philippine Consulate General in Toronto. A big thank you to our panelists for their enlightening talks, Professor Santos, Professor Salvador-Amores, and Professor Planta. To thank our speakers, the UPAAT will purchase your book and donate it to Centro Rizal for the Filipino community here to use. And we will also send all the speakers a special certificate of appreciation. Thank you to our speakers a while ago, His Excellency Ambassador Rodolfo Robles and Dr. Neil Garcia. Thank you to Trade Commissioner Nini Alvero and Helen Balderama for spearheading this event. And finally, thank you to the UPAAT Council and the UPAAT Education and Awareness Committee for helping us plan and deliver this event. We have a part 2 for this event, by the way, sometime in June. So please watch out for the announcement and flyer for that. We hope that you will be able to join us in that event as well. Thank you very much again and enjoy the rest of your day or night. Maraming salamat, magandang umaga, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.